back to the channel, guys. Welcome back to the boat gang. All right, we got the Oxidean Marine Oxi-digger build series part 2. Okay, in our previous upload we actually built the sponson, sealed the inside of the sponson. Today we're actually going to be adding flotation and installing the retainers and topping it off. Okay, we may get a jump on the tub, so stick around. Big B, what Ironclad RC. So, flotation in your sponson. The kit doesn't come with any type of flotation, so you need to actually provide your own. Okay, it's pretty easy to source foam. This foam right here actually come out of my tugboat, my Horizon Hobby tugboat box. Okay, they use this foam to protect the boat during shipping. Okay, it's like that soft foam. It's not real messy, so I figured it would actually work perfect, and I found a couple pieces that fit in my sponson like perfect, so I'm going to use this. The weight, it's not that heavy, you know. I guess you could use that, you know, regular styrofoam, the messy, when you cut it makes a mess. You could use that. You could use polyurethane pour foam, which may actually be your best option. That will ensure all the little voids in your sponson gets filled. If you're going to be using pour foam, you probably need to epoxy your boom tube retainers in before you pour the foam in. That's just going to make it easy to mount these and then pour the foam. Then you have to cut the top and refine the shape. This stuff right here, I'm gonna go ahead and cut it. Okay. And then we're gonna install these guys here, and I'm still kind of contemplating. I actually have this this stainless steel tubing, so this really thin stainless steel tubing, which, well, I was thinking it may be metal, but I think it might be stainless steel. It's not sticking to a magnet, but it came off of a back scratcher, one of those telescoping back scratchers. Okay, I actually found a piece that was large enough to go over my aluminum boom tube retainers. Okay, it fits perfect, and what I was thinking is we will install this in the sponson. Okay, and that's actually going to give us something to epoxy to, seal, and it should help retain our retainers so that they don't move in and out of our tub in those high-speed runs or hard crashes. Okay, so I'm still kind of contemplating using that. If I use this, I may not be able to get my retainer out the sponson. In that case, I need to change one out. But these are actually fairly thick. They're pretty thick aluminum, thicker than the ready-to-run retainers. So I'm seriously thinking about using this stainless steel. I've already got all 4 of them cut to size, you know, for my sponson. So we'll work on that later on. I was just kind of going over my thought process. You know, this video series is probably going to be kind of long, so I already have one cut basically. Okay, it basically fits right in there. Boom. All right, and what I did whenever I was cutting my foam, so basically I have a piece that fits in there perfect. Okay, it fits in there perfect, pretty snug. And basically what I'll do is line my foam up with this, like this bulkhead right here, this brace. Okay, line it up with that brace, and I'll actually just kind of mark it on the outside. Oh, I can barely see it, but I have it marked. Okay, and I'm just taking this little cutoff saw. Okay, and cutting it just a little bit smaller than my mark. I guess you can cut it larger and trim it up as needed. Alright, so you should have something that looks about like this, you know. Mine's going to fit kind of tight. I want it to kind of fill up the whole sponson, but I don't really want it to pop out the top, you know. This saw right here, it really don't cut off like little slithers all that great. And I guess a hot knife, you know, like a hot foam cutter, a wire cutter, may come in handy with something like this. But what I've been using is my knife. a knife that I've actually dedicated to cutting foam. Okay, it's an old oyster shucker knife, and I'll actually heat it up a little bit. Not too much. If you heat it up too much, it'll actually like melt the foam real hard. So I'm just going to kind of run it right over the top of that foam. Okay, just run it right over the top of the foam until I get a nice fit. Okay, clean up the bottom, square up all my edges so I'm not putting pressure on my sponson. All right, and you see that? We got a nice fitting piece of foam now. It's not like protruding past the top of my sponson. Okay, you guys see that? Just a little trick if you don't have a wire foam cutter, a hot wire. All right, so now we got to basically cut out our retainer, where our retainer is going to go. Okay, I guess I can use this hot knife for that. Okay, heat it up a little bit more and just cut out where my boom tube's going to go. Boom. Okay, looks good, just like that. And we're going to basically repeat the process on the back here. Well, darn, that piece right there basically fits right in. So when you're done with your sponson, it should look something like this, okay? You don't want your foam like extruding past the top. If it is, you can use your hot knife and just trim it up, okay? That may put pressure on your cap, and over time maybe delaminate it. So you don't really want foam packed in there to where it's going to put pressure on things, okay? So that turned out pretty good. All right, and I was actually prepping up and finding everything I needed to epoxy my retainers in, okay? But I actually noticed that we need to drill these retainers for our boom tube, okay? Our boom tube actually will have a hole drilled in it, okay? And our retainers will have a hole drilled in it. You just line that hole up in your retainer, and that basically locks your sponson in place, okay? So we're going to need to drill all 4 of our retainers, okay? So I went in my hardware bag, okay, and I looked through this bag of screws here. The screws that we need are not in there. We need to find 4 small screws. Okay, these small screws are for our boom tube retainers. Okay, so I opened it up and I'm noticing that these screws are a little short. Okay, so they're actually a little bit short, and we're not going to be able to get a nut on there. You guys see that? All right, so what I think happened is they oversized the retainer, which is good. Okay, the stock Oxi-digger has a thinner retainer. Okay, so the kit comes with a thicker tube, which is awesome. Okay, when they oversized the tube, they didn't compensate for the screw length. Okay, I would actually rather have this thicker retainer and have a short screw than have a thin retainer and a screw that fits. So I'm going to save these 4 screws for my other Oxi-digger. Actually, okay, when I put my Oxi-digger together, my original Oxi-digger, I lost one of the screws. I lost one of these screws right here, and I went to my hobby shop to pick up one, and he didn't have that size. So I actually picked up this 256 by 1/2 inch steel screw. Okay, now this screw right here, I think it's just a little bit bigger than in diameter than the stock screw, this will work. Okay, I got nuts for it. Actually picked up extra nuts because they're not locking nuts, so I can jam them on there or Loctite them. So this is what I'm going to use, a 256 by 1/2 inch. All right, I got extras. So now we need to actually figure out where we need to drill our hole. Okay, so I'm thinking 20 millimeters should be good. Okay, 20 millimeters from the end. That'll get it right up against the tub. Okay, so what I've done is actually made me a little jig right here so I can drill straight through my tube. Okay, so as you guys can see, I have a piece of angle aluminum. I got my tube sitting in the angle aluminum, and then I just found this scrap piece of metal, okay, that fit over my tube, and that's actually going to hold it in place. So I basically made me a jig here. So I measured 19 millimeters from the end. Okay, and I filed a little flat spot on my angle. All right, I got a punch. I found center on my angle, punched it, and then I drilled it. Okay, so what we can do is basically line our retainer up to the end of our angle metal, and we'll get a perfect hole on each one. Okay, so I'm basically just going to drill this, boom, straight down, and that'll hold it in place so you can get a nice perfect straight up and down drill. Okay, yeah, it worked. It worked perfect. Nice. All right. Close enough. All right, that's close enough. You can actually make a jig where you set your AOA. I'm not I guess I can check the AOA on that one, make my jig according, but you know, I figured I'd just do it this way. A lot of you guys aren't gonna make a jig, and you know, when you have them sitting there with the boom tubes in, they should be no teeter-totting. Okay, so I have some thickened epoxy. Okay, we're going to start epoxying these retainers in. I think I'm just going to lightly epoxy them in right now. Okay, lightly. When I say lightly, I'm just going to basically make sure that they're going to be watertight, but I'm not going to reinforce them at the moment. I can do all that once I know they're all perfect in the sponson. You know what I'm saying? Just going to kind of tack them in place right now. Okay, I'm using 30-minute. Make sure you have some alcohol mixed up. Make sure you have an extra brush mixed up, some paper towels, maybe some Q-tips to clean out any epoxy that gets in these aluminum tubes. Okay, I actually I roughed up my aluminum tubes with 40 grit. Okay. Go ahead and take the foam out. Just gonna lightly epoxy them in right now. Just enough epoxy to kind of waterproof and hold them in place, you know. I'm using the transom of the tub and the stuffing tube that came with the kit to get the distance, the spacing right. You know, once I get them glued up and I put my boom tube in, make sure they're perfect. I'm using that to space it. Okay, I'm trying to work fast. I'm trying to explain to you what I'm doing. I wasn't really ready to mix the epoxy, but I was like, shit, screw it. God hates a coward, you know? God hates a coward. Just do it. Just do it. Like my old fishing captain would say, God hates a coward. Just freaking do it. So I'm actually going to put a little bit of oil. I got these little short boom tubes right here. I'm going to put a little bit of oil on them so they don't get stuck in the retainer. All right. I got my boom tube retainers epoxied in. Okay, I actually shut it off. I wanted to like focus on my boat, and if I would have kept the camera rolling and I would have been trying to walk you guys through it while I'm doing it, I may have gotten something wrong, so I just turned it off. I'm sorry, but okay. So off camera, I made sure all these boom tube retainers were straight up and down. Okay, so that the screw holes line up to our boom tubes once we drill the holes, the vertical holes. Okay, off camera, I took this just piece of cutting board right here. I basically used this as a like a gauge, okay, where to set my hole at on all of them. All right, just went in there and set my hole on all of them, so that it's the same on each one of them. Okay, I left this little like lip hanging off on the outside. Once I seal everything up, I could put me a little like bead fillet of epoxy around that, just to kind of make it look nice and for extra waterproofing. Okay, with my thickened epoxy, once I felt comfortable enough that everything was right, I took it and put it in here, and I put some up against the side, put some against that side, and I spun this retainer, okay, and it just kind of got epoxy all the way around all of them. Okay, some of them I went a little heavy, some of them not so much. It was starting to kick off. I mean, I literally just finished this up, you guys. Just finished it up. Like I mentioned, I used the transom as my parallel gauge. Even using this, I still have, once it's laying in its like normal position, it's touching back here, okay, on both sides, but I have this little gap up forward. But I think that it's going to be all right. I actually have both of those riggers are like that. Yeah, once I set my sponsons, it'll actually tighten everything up, so I'm not too worried about that. The main thing I was focusing on, the most tedious part of the whole mix, was making sure I didn't have any teeter-tot. Make sure both of these AOAs were absolutely perfect to one another. Okay, and I have it flat back here, and I kept checking it with the shim. Well, this ain't it. I got another one that actually slid up under there, perfect, and I would check it on both of them. I would check it on both of them, make sure both were identical while it was kicking off. While I was working on the hole alignment and placement of the boom tubes, I kept checking it here, make sure it was flat. Really spent a lot of time on this. Oiling these, that was a good idea. Putting that oil on there. I had this one back here want to get stuck on me, so I actually pulled it out, sanded the wet epoxy off, the oil off, and I've actually reinstalled it. Glad I put the oil in there, because it would have got stuck in it. And with the oil, make sure you don't get oil all over your boat. I was super careful not to get oil on the side of my boat. Well, actually, it looks like I got some on there, but I think that's epoxy. But yeah, you don't want to get oil on your boat, because if you get oil on your freaking boat, the epoxy's not going to stick when we go to seal it. So be careful for that. Okay. I think they're good. I think they're good. So what I'm about to do, before we put the top on, I'm going to mix up some more 30-minute. And you see how this one's kind of thick. Okay. I'm gonna before this dries completely, and we have to sand it, rough it up to get the epoxy to stick. Before it dries completely, I'm gonna go ahead and like basically slather this whole section right here with thickened epoxy. I decided not to use these guys. Okay, it would have just been, I had a hard enough time doing it like I did it without these in the mix, but this would have actually been a lighter option. I could have filled the inside of this with epoxy and slid it on there, and I wouldn't have to like slather it on, you know, because I really don't want these things to move. And like I mentioned earlier, with these right here, if something was off, I have to remove one of these or I bend one, you know, I may have a hard time getting it out. With these, all you have to do is stick a soldering iron, hot soldering iron in there, heat up the epoxy, and they'll pull right out. So it's good. It's good. I'm gonna call it good. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and slather these up. I'll show you what it looks like when I'm done, and then we'll put the top on and I'll let you guys go. So I went through with a fine-tooth comb, made sure I had a nice fitment on my cap. Okay, actually had a tough time, like right in here. I had some, epoxy on the inside of this lip, and I couldn't push it down, so I got it all straightened out. Actually sanded just a little bit more angle on this front, not much, probably won't even make a difference, but figured it, a little bit more aerodynamic. Okay, going to use the 30-minute and cabin seal. Going to mix it up runny, but not too runny, not too thick. Using the 30-minute because it's got a higher tensile strength than the 15-minute. Okay, so before you seal it up, you need to make sure everything's done. The inside's prepped up, sealed. Okay, the top piece is sealed on the inside. Yeah, make sure your retainers are all on the money. Everything's sitting nice and flat when you have your boom tubes in. Final chance. So I'm gonna fast forward through it. Pretty simple. And so I think 3 grams of epoxy should be enough for this. Might be able to do both with it. I don't know. I don't really want to skimp out on this, but I don't want to go too freaking heavy either. I want to make sure that top's on there good. So I got the top on. Okay, I ended up using around 3.5 grams. Use these clear and black like hair rubber bands for braiding hair. They're real elasticy, real stretchy, and they were actually perfect. I tried to use them in the break where the tape was. See how I got them in between the tape breaks. Use C-clamps, well, squeeze clamps, quick grips on the back, and just a regular clamp on the front. Should be good. All right, give it 24 hours to kick off till I'll touch it again. So I'm gonna go ahead and do the same thing to this one, and I'll show you guys what it looks like when they're completely done. All we have left to do is seal the outside, basically. I got both of them epoxied, all right, sealed up. I got my rubber bands and tape on. I wish I would have flipped my first sponson over after I glued it up, but I didn't. So I'm reminding you guys, once you glue it up, you may have better results, more solid result if you flip the sponson over, so that the adhesive epoxy drips down onto that top piece you glued up. You know what I'm saying? Which I really don't think is going to be an issue. I actually epoxied that one really good. So yeah, we'll take the tape off here shortly. Okay, so it's actually the next day, and they turned out great. The top side, nice and tight. Okay, took all that tape and rubber bands off, and basically all we have left to do with this is seal the wood. Okay, so the next video we'll be working on the tub, and you know, in between tub and dry times we'll be sanding and sealing the sponsons. Okay, so thanks for watching part 2 of the Oxi-digger build series.